In 1953, a patient named John Murray received a diagnosis that doctors considered a definitive, irreversible, fatal prognosis. He was sent home to live out his remaining weeks. Yet, a few months later, he walked back into the clinic for a routine checkup, and the doctors were stunned. Every physical marker of the pathology had completely vanished. His scans showed an absolute clean slate. What was this? A laboratory error? A massive fluke? Or are we looking at a phenomenon that shatters our conventional understanding of biology? Are we talking about a dormant, evolutionary potential within the human body, one that only triggers during a terminal crisis? Today, as we continue our exploration of exceptional human experiences, we will unpack the phenomenon of sudden recovery. We'll look at this through a multidisciplinary lens, breaking it down into 3 distinct levels. From documented medical anomalies to the depths of transpersonal psychology, where shifting one's core identity becomes the ultimate key to systemic cellular shift. And finally, we will explore the existential aspect, why a profound sense of purpose can sometimes prove stronger than a biological breakdown. Let's dive into how this mechanism actually works. In official medical literature, this phenomenon is referred to by a strict clinical term, spontaneous remission. The foundation for studying this was laid in 1993 when the Institute of Noetic Sciences compiled the first large-scale database of approximately 3,500 officially validated anomalies of this kind. Today, this research continues. Global online registries allow practicing physicians worldwide to log new cases in real time. Statistically, it occurs roughly once in every 100,000 patients. For classical medicine, that number is a statistical anomaly, a glitch in the system that is easier to overlook than to rewrite the laws of biology. But this is where we run into a major logical dead end. If this were just about diagnostic errors, we would be talking about a few isolated, quirky stories. But thousands of documented medical files are not an error. They are a fact. In physics, if a single experiment disproves an established theory, scientists change the theory. They don't ignore the experiment. Yet in medicine, these cases have long remained in a blind spot. Why? Because the modern biomedical model treats the body as an isolated machine. If a machine breaks down, you fix it from the outside. You surgically remove the damaged part or treat the malfunction with medication. Cases of sudden recovery break this template. They prove that a biological system is capable of completely rewriting its own status from within in a remarkably short time, entirely driven by its own internal resources. Science could document the outcome on an MRI or in a blood panel. It sees the result, but it fails to answer the ultimate question: what flipped the switch? What kind of internal command forced the immune system to kick into a gear that isn't written in any standard medical textbook? To find that command, we have to look beyond pure biology and step into the space where our inner programming is formed, into human consciousness. What appears to be a biological miracle under a microscope has a well-structured explanation within transpersonal psychology. One of the first to map out this mechanism was the psychoanalyst Stanislav Grof. Through his extensive research into non-ordinary states of consciousness, Grof demonstrated that a profound existential or physical crisis is not a system failure, but a radical mechanism of self-regulation. He introduced the concept of holotropic states, moments when the mind temporarily deactivates the rigid filters of the ego to access the body's latent evolutionary resources. To understand how this mental shift impacts biology, we can turn to the work of American psychiatrist Arthur Dykman. He divided human psychological functioning into 2 fundamental modes. The action mode. This is where most of us spend 90% of our time. Its entire purpose is control, manipulation of the environment, defense, and struggle. In this state, the nervous system is locked in a chronic sympathetic tone, keeping cortisol levels high. When a person receives a severe diagnosis, they instantly default to action mode. They start a furious fight. But if the conflict actually originates deep within their own personality, This constant internal warfare only drains the system. The receptive mode. This is a state of deep psychological neutrality. It triggers when the ego finally acknowledges its own helplessness and completely drops its need for control. In transpersonal psychology, this precise moment is known as radical surrender. When a patient reaches a point of absolute breakdown and mentally surrenders, the subconscious instantly switches from action mode to receptive mode. This is not a capitulation to the disease. It is the total shutdown of the chronic stress program. It triggers what Ken Wilber called a shift in the paradigm of identity. The individual stops identifying with their old mental patterns, their accumulated resentments, fears, and conditioned life scripts. At that exact moment, the neuroendocrine system is liberated from the relentless dictatorship of cortisol and adrenaline. For the first time in years, the body steps out of survival mode, unlocking the evolutionary mechanisms of cellular adaptation and regeneration that were previously bottlenecked by psychological tension. In everyday language, surrendering implies giving up, admitting defeat, and passively waiting for the end. But in the realm of transpersonal psychology, the term carries a completely opposite meaning. Here, surrender is not a capitulation. It is an act of supreme inner maturity and courage. It is the moment when the ego fully admits the futility of its old strategies and stops trying to micromanage what cannot be controlled. When we face a crisis, our instinct is to double down on control. We scan our bodies every minute, obsess over prognosis, fight symptoms, and live in constant terror of the future. The paradox is that this mental hypermobilization keeps the nervous system trapped in a vice grip of unending stress. The body burns an immense amount of energy to maintain this internal defense network, leaving no resources for basic cellular repair. Radical surrender dissolves this tension. A person essentially tells themselves, I have done everything I could. My old ways aren't working, and I'm letting go of the outcome. In that moment, the focus of attention snaps out of an imagined future with all its anxiety and expectations and lands squarely in the absolute present. From a psychophysiological standpoint, this mental shift instantly releases the internal pressure. It lifts the mental block that was paralyzing the parasympathetic nervous system, which is solely responsible for rest, cell regeneration, and resource recovery. The ego's defensive barriers crumble, and the energy that was previously wasted on resisting reality is redirected inward. This is not passivity. The person still takes whatever practical steps are necessary for their body, but internally, the panic, the resentment, and the question, why me, are gone. A profound inner neutrality takes over, and it is precisely within this state of stillness and zero resistance that the organism finally gets the space to run the restorative programs that were previously drowned out by mental noise. When the ego surrenders and drops its control, a vacuum opens up within consciousness. The old goals, the validation seeking, the social masks, and other people's expectations, things that once felt critical, suddenly drop away like ash. And what steps into the foreground is what Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl famously termed the will to meaning. Frankl, who survived the absolute extremes of human suffering, proved that a human being can endure almost any physical strain or critical environment if they possess a deep, core understanding of what they're living for. In the context of sudden recovery, this concept takes on a very tangible biological reality. The human body is not just a collection of organs. It is a highly sophisticated information network. And this network needs a reason to deploy its deepest resources for recovery. As long as a person lives on autopilot, catering to old traumas, resentments, or someone else's expectations, their internal system exists in a state of low-grade self-destruction. It lacks an evolutionary objective to thrive. It is simply running down its clock. But when, at the absolute edge of a crisis, a person uncovers their authentic, stripped-down existential meaning, a profound biological choice occurs. This new purpose, whether it's a creative mission, a realization of one's true potential, or a clear understanding of one's place in the universe, acts as a powerful integrator for the entire physiology. Biology follows the vector of the spirit. The brain receives a signal that the existence of this specific individual is critical to something larger. In response to this new overarching objective, the organism mobilizes its deepest hidden reserves. Dormant genetic pathways align, the immune response recalibrates, and the endocrine system stops fueling degradation. Meaning literally becomes a biological factor, flipping a switch within the cell and shifting it from survival mode, decay, into a state of renewal and evolutionary growth. All documented cases of sudden recovery leave us facing an uncomfortable yet foundational truth. Our current assumptions about the boundaries of human potential are far too narrow. We have been conditioned to view our bodies as mere biological machines that operate independently of our thoughts, values, and existential crises. The phenomenon of sudden recovery proves the exact opposite. This isn't a quick-fix recipe or a medical blueprint. It is a stark reminder that beneath our social roles, our daily anxieties, and our mental noise lies a massive, evolutionarily hardwired capacity for self-regulation. A power that doesn't demand more fighting, but rather stillness and a willingness to become someone vastly larger than we have been led to believe.